Hello, parents and students. This is a brief video on the beginning of topic 6, which is about percents. Percents, per cent, and we know we have 100 cents in a dollar. So when we have a percent, it always goes over 100. When you're dealing with percents, you can easily make them into a fraction or into a decimal. This, using our place value knowledge, there are 2 zeros, so 2 spots after the decimal, and we're going to fill in the 30, so 30 hundredths. Okay. Now, we learned back in 5th grade that all fractions must be reduced. So again, this one could be reduced. If we slice off those zeros, we have 3/10, and that could also be written as 0.3, 3/10, because the 0 is a trailing 0. Okay. Now, in class, we created this little cheat sheet that can be used on the quiz and test, as long as students can find it. It is just to help us remember how these move around. So we're going to look at that right now and look at some problems to help us practice. So here's our triangle. At the top we have fractions, and then we have decimals and percents. When we move, so if we were given a fraction, we can turn that fraction into a decimal. And the way we do that is we are going to divide the numerator, which is our top number, by our denominator. Okay. Now, what that means is if we have something such as 3/8, okay? When we have a fraction and we want to move to a decimal, we are going to take 3 divided by 8. So the 8 is our divisor. Now, does 8 go into 3? No. So we're going to add a decimal and a 0. Does 8 go into 30? Yes. And it goes in 3 times. 8 times 3 is 24. That leaves 6 left over. But we can't have a remainder, so we're going to continue on. We're going to add another 0. 8 goes into 67 times, which is 56, and leaves 4 left over. But again, we're not done, so we're going to add another 0. And then 8 goes into 45 times. So when we have a fraction, we can turn it into a decimal by taking the numerator, the top number, and dividing it by the bottom number, the denominator. Okay? Now, once we have a decimal, we can now turn it into a percent. Okay? Fractions don't always become percents very easily unless they're easy ones. It is much easier to take your fraction, turn it into a decimal, and then take your decimal and turn it into a percent. To do that, you're going to multiply by 100. We also talked about using our place value knowledge. That means we're going to move the decimal 2 times in the bigger direction. Okay? So what that means is, if we go back to this example, we have 0.375. We could multiply this by 100, but unfortunately a lot of students make mistakes when they're multiplying with multiple zeros. So instead, what we can do is decimals are small, percents are large. So we're going to take our decimal and we're going to move it to the 2 times bigger. So our percent becomes 37.5%. Our decimal is small, but our percent is big. Okay? So you have a fraction. We used 3/8. We had a decimal, 0.375, and we have a percent, 37.5%. You can be given any of those 3, but you always need to find the other 2, whichever the other 2 are for your example. All right, now, if you have a percent and need to get to a decimal, you can also do that. And what we can do is, instead of multiplying, we can do the inverse or the opposite. And what we'll do is we can divide by 100. Again, this causes students some concern at times, so we could also take our percent, and instead of moving it bigger, we can move it in the smaller direction 2 times, because there's 2 zeros, using our powers of 10. So we were using, and I just got rid of it. So let's switch to a new one since I got rid of the one that I was using to demonstrate to you. Let's go ahead and take 8%. Okay, I have a percent, I want to go to my decimal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 100, or I'm going to take that decimal, which is hidden right now, but I know it's at the end of any whole number, and I'm going to move it 2 times in the smaller direction. So 1, 2. Now, as soon as I do that, the percent comes off, and I have 0.08. So my percent was 8%. My decimal is 0.08. Okay. And what we can do is we can take our percent, and if we want to get back to the fraction, we can put the percent over 100, but we must remember to simplify. Okay, so in this problem, we had 8%, so I'm going to put my percent over 100. I'm going to take my 8 and put it over 100. As soon as I do that, I don't use the percent anymore. Here's my fraction, but we do need to simplify this. These numbers are both even, so we could divide by 2. And if you divide by 2, you're actually going to have to do it twice, because we can actually divide by 4 and reduce to 2 over 25. And that's how we would simplify this problem. So students should have this on their index card, and they should not lose it so that they can use it on the quiz or test. Now, some of these percents and decimals and fractions work very easily as the ones we were just looking at, but there are a few that can be a problem, because sometimes we have percents that are greater than 100. So if we were to take the problem 215%, okay? if I have a percent, I can divide by 100, move my decimal 2 times, and I can get a decimal. So if I do that, my decimal's hiding right here at the end. I move it 2 times to make it smaller, and I get 2 and 15/100ths. We no longer have the percent sign because we have moved the decimal, and now it's a decimal. Then, to find a fraction, you take your 215% over, take your percent and put it over 100 and simplify. So we have this. Now 100 goes into 200, we know 2 times. That leaves us 15 over 100. We can reduce this. If it ends in a 5, I know that 5 goes into those numbers, so I'm going to divide both the top and the bottom by 5, and that gives me 2. 15 divided by 5 is 3, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. So I have a fraction, I have a decimal, and I have a percent. Okay? So that is if we have a percent that is greater than 100. Okay? Lots of extra credit kind of deal. More than 1 whole. But sometimes we might have something such as 0.9%, 9/10 of a percent, a very, very small amount. All right, well, again, we're given a percent, so we can take the percent and turn it into a decimal by dividing by 100. Now, yes, there is a decimal here, but this is still very much a percent. To get rid of this percent, I'm going to have to move the decimal 2 times or divide it by 100 to get my official decimal that does not have a percent sign. When I do that, if I take my 9/10 or 0.9% and move it 2 times, that gives me 0.009. And now I will no longer use that percent because I've moved the decimal. So my decimal is very small. It is 0.009. My percent was 0.9%, but my decimal, big but already small, must be super small. Now, yes, you can normally put the percent over 100 and simplify, but the problem is if you have a decimal, you can't have a decimal and a fraction in the same problem. So what is easier to do is take this, use your place value knowledge. This has 1, 2, 3 spots. This is 9/1000ths. So there are 3 spots, 3 zeros with a 1 in front, and put your 9, 9/1000ths. All right, and then that is the fraction. All right, and one more problem I'd like to show you. Once in a while, we get something such as 4/5%. Again, very small and very much a fraction, which doesn't really help us because to find our percent to decimal, we're supposed to be moving our decimal place. We don't have a decimal place. Now, if you remember your place value knowledge, you can easily make this into a 1/10, make your decimal. But many don't remember that, so I'm going to show you again how to find the decimal. So 4 divided by 5, okay, 5 goes into 4, it doesn't. So I'm going to add a decimal and a 0, bring that decimal up. 5 goes into 40 though, 8 times. So this actual percentage is 0.8% or 8/10 of a percent. These two are the same, but this one allows us to move more easily. Just as we did in the last problem, let's take our 8% and move the decimal 2 times. Oops, sorry. Move it 2 times. That gives us 0.008 as our decimal. And then we can take that and use our place value knowledge. This is 8/1000ths, or 1, 2, 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3 zeros with a 1 in front. Put the 8 on top, and then we will be able to solve that. Okay? It is even, so we know 2 can go into that fraction. We know 4 can go into that fraction also. All right, and does 8 go in there? And 8 might also. So let's go ahead with 4, because most of the students will see that one right away. 8 divided by 4 is 2. I know 4 goes into 125 times, and then I have a 0. And obviously 8 could have gone in, because now I'm going to have to reduce this one more time because they're both even. So that's all right, I can divide by 2. And when I do that, I get 1/125. So I also have my fraction, my decimal, and my percent. Alrighty? So if your student has not made one of these index cards, please freeze it here and make sure they do, and that they do not lose it so they can use it on the quiz and test. Alrighty, hope that helps. Bye.